As I said, I'm honored to be a part of this very important discussion about a country that is too often misunderstood. I was born an Afghan refugee after my parents escaped when my mother was 8 months pregnant with me during the Soviet War. Long story short, I went back to Afghanistan as a correspondent for both CNN and then NBC News, living and traveling throughout the country for many years. There was violence, there was war, but there was also so much hope. To see the progress the Afghan people made, especially the women and girls, was astonishing, considering all they have lived through and were still living through. Much of that hope and light was shattered and turned into darkness in August of 2021, when so many Afghans felt betrayed by the US withdrawal and that of the international community. After 20 years of promising a continued friendship and partnership, they felt abandoned by a friend who they say betrayed them. These aren't my words. These are the words of so many Afghans I've spoken with. It's been more than a year now since we saw those extraordinary and often horrifying images of the US and international withdrawal. But the story didn't end there, and it did not begin in 2001 either. Afghanistan has been in our headlines on and off for several decades, yet it's still one of the most misunderstood countries on the planet, even after 2 decades of international involvement. The Taliban are now in charge and have already implemented their strict form of governance. Women and girls are effectively being erased from everyday life, and poverty is rampant. Afghanistan, the Wounded Land, is a remarkable World Channel 4-part documentary film series and probably one of the most comprehensive visual dives into modern-day Afghanistan that I've ever seen on American television. Video and voices telling the history that led us to today. First, I want to thank everyone who's joined us today for this virtual discussion. I want to thank PBS and the teams at World Channel and WGBH who have found a home for this amazing series. And a big thank you to the panelists who I'm about to introduce for being here to give their perspectives and stories on the film series and on Afghanistan. Let's start with the filmmakers. Let me introduce you to Ms. Mayte Carrasco and Mr. Marcel Mettelsiefen. Mayte is an award-winning Spanish documentary filmmaker and novelist. She is the founder of the Big Story Films production company. She is also an award-winning correspondent who has covered some of the world's most dangerous conflicts around the globe. And as if she wasn't busy enough, she has also published several books and novels. She is joining us from Canada in Toronto, where she's at a film festival right now with Marcel, who is an Oscar-nominated and award-winning German documentary director. Marcel first traveled to Afghanistan in 2001, documenting the war as a photographer, and has worked continuously in the country ever since, most recently working on a project there even this past summer. Marcel's awards include winning an Emmy, BAFTA, Peabody, Rory Peck Award, among many others. Welcome, Marcel and Mayte.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to have you guys here, and great film. Let's also welcome now Ms. Zohra Yusuf Daoud, who before the fall of the Afghan government was the media advisor for Ms. Rula Ghani in the office of the First Lady of Afghanistan. She is also known for being the first and only Miss Afghanistan in 1972. Ms. Daoud grew up in the country and was a television personality before having to flee following the Soviet invasion. Since then, she has been an outspoken activist for Afghan women, has authored books, and is the founder of the Afghan Women's Association of Southern California, where she is joining us today. Welcome, Zohra Jan.
Thank you very much, Atia Jan. Thank you for this proper introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, but definitely not least, Ms. Nasrin Nawa, a former BBC journalist in Afghanistan and current Fulbright scholar at the University of Nebraska. Nasrin was born and raised in Afghanistan. Before joining the BBC as a journalist, she worked as a senior media and communications staff member for the Office of the President. Nasrin was also the Women's Development Director for the Afghanistan National Cycling Federation and is also one of their riding team members. She is joining us from Nebraska. Welcome, Nasrin Jan.
Thank you, Atia Jan. I really feel honored being part of this today. Thank you.
We're honored to have you. We're honored to have all of you. And again, I'm honored to be hosting this with such an incredible panel. Mayte and Marcel, let's start with you two, the filmmakers. Can you tell us about the making of Afghanistan, the Wounded Land? What inspired you to take this project on, and what do you hope people will take away from your documentary?
You start.
I start.
Ladies
Well,
first.
for us, it was a very important, for us, we have Afghanistan in our heart. We have been traveling to there many years, and we met actually in Afghanistan. And my first trip, I think it was in 2008. I think we felt in love with this country and its people. I think it's a very complicated country, the history to explain, but it's very challenging. And I think that the first thing we thought when Lucio Mollica asked Marcel to do those 4 films, it was, wow, we have a huge work here, because we have to explain in 4 parts, 52 minutes in 4 episodes, 40 years of war. But we decided to do it in a very, I don't know, we thought we did this writers' rooms. And in the writers' rooms, we took some decisions. The first one was the characters. We said, okay, Afghanistan have always been explained by foreigners. So let's listen to the Afghans, because the main complaint when we were there working was, hey, we always have Westerns around, people from abroad telling us what to do in our country. So, and they never listen to us. So we said, okay, let's listen to the Afghans. So we decided to have most of the characters are Afghans, and 50% of them women. It was a very important decision, because not only in this series, but in the average documentaries in the world, we only see men normally. So in Afghanistan, I think it's even more important to have women on screen, politicians, women talking about politics, and experts. So what is missing normally. So for us was very, very important. Also, we took decisions on the events we had to explain, right?
I think what we wanted to do is trying to not use any academics and people who read about the country, but people who have been involved throughout the last 40 years. And we're not, or 50 years, because we actually start in the area of Daoud and the golden times of everything what the Afghans are still memorizing of the huge and big opportunity this country once had, and how much has been lost when everything started in 79, when the war started, and that we wanted to have people who've been involved, and to show that this country is this history, unfortunately, of a division on so many different levels. Division between countryside and city, generations, between obviously views and ideologies, and try to give all of them a voice, to make really 360 degrees. So we hear people like Zohra Daoud, Sima Samar, we listen to strong women, but we do listen as well to Hekmat Yar. We do listen as well to the people who started with the Taliban. We have Masoud Khalili, who gives us the poetic part of the Mujahideen dream they had in the beginning. So I think that was very important. But obviously, the big challenging part of it was we're doing film for an foreign audience, for people who do not understand the nitty-gritty of the so complex history of Afghanistan. So we had to break it down to the universal lines and make it entertaining and digestible. And that's what we try to do with breaking it to emotional storylines, find the characters we have as well in archive, and be able to simplify just enough in order to still be able to understand the turning points of this history of this country.
I was going to ask you what one of the greatest challenges were, and you explained that eloquently, because that is the hardest part about telling the Afghan stories. It has so many nuances. It's so complicated that it's almost overwhelming for many people, and then they just give up on trying to learn about it, which is crazy to think that 20 years of international involvement and still the majority of the country doesn't know even the start of what the problem lies. And this is going to lead me to the first clip that we'd like to share from the episode 1, which is a lot of people, when they think of Afghanistan, their history starts possibly in 2001. If they want to look further, they start in 1979 with the Soviet invasion. But modern Afghan history, to understand what brought us to these 40 years, you have to go earlier. And Chris, can we play a clip from episode 1?
When I was in a 12th grade in high school, good thing happened to me. I became Miss Afghanistan in 1972. One class of the society called us westernized people, because we dress like Western people, we live like Western people, and we were listening to their music. We thought this is way of life for us.
So this clip introduced us to a war-free Afghanistan. It also introduced us to one of our panelists here, Ms. Zohra Daoud. You mentioned in Kabul, very westernized. In the series itself, you mentioned the village divide when it came to the city life in Kabul and when it came to the villages. Can you elaborate on that?
Thank you very much for having me in this wonderful discussion. And the name is very interesting name, and it's very sad name. Afghanistan is wounded. Thank you, Marcel, and thank you, Carrasco, for bringing that to us. Well, the gap was very deep between the people who are living in the cities and the people who are living in the villages, especially in 60s and 70s. Of course, people living in the cities, they are more educated, more open-minded, and they had more economic opportunities. But people who are living in the villages, they were less educated, more conservative, and they had less economic opportunities. And this gap brought some sort of reaction towards the people who are living in the cities, the elite of Afghanistan. And as a result of that, we had this coup d'etat of 1978. Although the coup d'etat of 1978, which happened by the leftists, it was, there was two fractions. There was a Halk fraction and it was a Parcham. The Parcham fraction was the people in that in a branch, they were all from the educated families. They were students of Kabul University. But the other branch, which was the Halk branch, they were the people, they were living in the villages of Afghanistan. And they had a strong voice. And this gap, of course, made the society very unbalanced in those days. But after the Soviet invasion in 1979, and when the Mujahideen came in power, most of these village people, they were the ones who fought against Soviets. Do not forget that. Even the village people, they fought against British. They were the ones who fought against Soviet. They were the ones that fought against American presence and NATO presence in Afghanistan. And today that they are successful, they toppled the government of Afghanistan and they pushed the Americans to leave Afghanistan. The Taliban are the people of village who took the power in Afghanistan. And they brought their own culture on the people of big cities like Kabul, Herat, Mazar, and Kandahar. My point was, that there was always in the third world country, there's always gap between the elite of the society and the rest of the society. And of course, that was in Afghanistan. It was true in Afghanistan too.
Absolutely. And I feel like throughout history, even before in the early 1900s, every time there was some step towards progress, there was giant leaps back with those upset about it. Nasrin, John, you grew up in Afghanistan in the last 2 decades. I'm curious to know what you think of, what goes through your mind when you see clips from the 1960s and 70s. You see the lifestyle in Kabul then. It was very different than the lifestyle that we witnessed in the last 20 years. And I know that when I spoke to a lot of female activists in Kabul since 2001, they would say our goal is not to get back to the 1960s and 70s. We want to pave our own path. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that. What goes through your head when you see those clips and you see what Afghanistan that you've never known, really.
Yeah, it was somehow incredible. Although most of the footage was not very new for me, like I have seen some of them before, but like having them in a series and following them like a story, it really made me feel, wow, we had such a good time. I know we were even that time polarized, as Zohra John said, like it was not perfect. Like behind the scene, under the ground, many things were happening, but at least we had some incredible things happening. Like at least we had the basic rights for women. So yeah, I like the footage from like pre-war footage. It was very good watching that. But at the same time, like it was a mixture of feeling. It made me really happy because the only thing I experienced in Afghanistan was a conservative society, was war, was insecurity, was the fear. And like, I know we had some positive things too, but like the negative was more like it was very difficult to digest that pre-war footage. Like I can't believe it existed one time. But at the same time, it really made me sad because I think we lost it. Not even once. We lost it like twice. And if we like see deeper in many decades, we even lost it more than twice. And it is really sad.
It is very sad. And when you verbalize it, it hits again. You know, I've always said if a time machine was ever invented, I would go back to the 60s and 70s and experience the Afghanistan my parents experienced. And I just want to reiterate how lucky we are to have both of you here to give different perspectives and the different lives lived in Kabul at different times and growing up in your prime. I also want to go back to the filmmakers now. Incredible footage. As a journalist who lived in Afghanistan for many years, as an Afghan girl growing up in America, I've seen a lot of images and footage of Afghans. I've seen more pictures, but you guys found footage that I hadn't seen before. Can you tell us where you got that from? Because you know a lot of it was burned during the time of the first reign of the Taliban.
Yeah, for us it was an amazing job to watch 600 hours of archive material. It was huge, but it was really wonderful. I remember I was up to 3 o'clock in the morning watching those films in the 60s, for example, the hippies going to India and then Kabul, and this French and German 8mm films. Amazing. It was so difficult to cut some seconds and to select, but we had an amazing team of people watching and searching for this archive material. Actually, they won an award, the Focal Award for this. And it was amazing for us. And we really couldn't cut it. It was very important to have all kinds of material, not only from the Western televisions at that time and during that time, but also we had the lack, we were very lucky to have Soviet films and also Afghan films from the 70s, never shown again, exclusive. For example, this demonstration in the street between communist students in the university and Islamist students, with Hekmat Yar at that time being a hero, and after becoming during the series a warlord. it was amazing for us having this and having the characters transforming themselves during the time also. In the storytelling for us, this is why the series, you can see the series as entertainment, is because you follow the biography in the storytelling of the characters. And then you see the first episode and you need to see the second in order to watch what happened with these people. And this, I think it was very successful in the series. But the archive material was very, very important for us for the Soviet films, for example, because they have never been seen here, let's say, in the US or in Europe. So that was very surprising for us too, to watch all this material and discover Daoud and discover the people and discover the first chapter. Even for me, I didn't know the story of Afghanistan, so the history. So finally, I realized so many things through this archive material that had never been told.
I think, especially this time in the Soviet tradition of filmmaking, there was so much unbelievable strong footage, but as well at the Afghan Film Institute, footage which we asked to digitalize, stuff which hasn't been digitalized. We reached out to the Afghan diaspora community, especially in the US and in Canada, to see if they do have footage at home, because as you said, a lot of people try to save this national heritage by just taking it out of the country when they fled the country. But especially the Soviet film archive for Afghanistan was unbelievably strong and rich, and all filmed in this beautiful film material, which obviously was amazing for a filmmaker to work with and to discover that we found our protagonists who we interviewed in almost at least one. We could show them as well in archive, and I think that's when it really starts to get amazing. If you want to do a documentary like this,
like Zohra, for example, we were so excited to discover Zohra, and that we found the archive material of Zohra there. Yeah. It was amazing.
That was amazing. You got she is the first and only Miss Afghanistan in 1972, and then you had a clip come up. So when I say that I wish I had a time machine, the closest that I got was that first episode. It was like being in a time machine and going back to Afghanistan from then. So episode 1 dove into the golden age, but it's in episode 2 titled Jihad, where we witness the beginning of the cancer of war that's plagued the country. Chris, can we play an episode from Jihad?
Life is dangerous in Afghanistan. I have to escape from Afghanistan, our lovely country, to go to the Pakistan to join with our brother and Muslim brother.
Even I personally lived through all these things, and sometimes when I think that how much capacity you as a human have, how much resilience you can build, how much capacity you would have to digest all these. And I think we should burst, we should turn to pieces with all these pain.
It was a very powerful clip. It's a powerful episode. Dr. Sima Samad in that clip mentioned resilience. And that's such a fitting word when it comes to the Afghan people, for the absolute tragedy after tragedy they have lived through and continue to live through. Mayte, I'd like to go to you. You've covered a lot of conflict around the globe in a lot of countries and a lot of areas. How do you define what the Afghans have lived through and continue to live through in comparison to what you've seen everywhere?
Afghanistan is totally different. It's a different country because it's a crossroad. It's between Asia and the West. It was a neighbor of the Soviet Union in the 70s. It is a neighbor of India, Pakistan, historical enemies. I think it's very difficult for Afghanistan. It has always had this circle of history. Foreign ingerence, foreign people that have interest inside, and also struggles inside between warlords. This is the big problem, and it repeats itself. And the foreigners taking advantage of these warlords, using them for their interest. So what I've seen in Afghanistan is the resilience of the people and how people react and how people struggle to get out of the war anyhow. And they try, they do it, they have success on it, but something happened again and again. And there are the women of Afghanistan. The women of Afghanistan are the most strong women I have met. They are really strong, they're very smart, and always has been there the objective of the men in this war struggle and this circle. And I think through the history of Afghanistan, they have been always struggling for their rights. And even at the beginning, it was a bubble, but they tried to have their rights with the king. But later, they struggle also with the Mujahideen, because people think that Afghan women were only under, they cut their rights only with the Taliban. No, this happened before with the Mujahideen. It happened with the civil war. With the civil war, the women were raped, the women suffered so much, and the women had to leave Afghanistan, and they have to suffer all of this. When Taliban arrived, a lot of women said, thanks God, law is coming. So just for example, for the people to understand, because the story of Afghanistan is very difficult to explain, but if you see somebody like Shukriya Baraksai explaining this, or all the victims that we see in this third episode, we can understand better. So I think they are very strong, very resilient. And if we want to change something in Afghanistan, we need to change men education. This is the thing we have to do, not to invest millions in any other stuff. Let's start with this, and maybe something happen with the rights of the woman.
Absolutely. That's something that I always have to tell people, is that the civil war was so bad and barbaric that the Taliban were welcomed as a reprieve from the civil war. That's the most terrifying part of it all, and it's a reminder. Now to Nasrin John, Afghan women and resilience. How would you define that when it comes to what you've seen and what you've lived through?
It's a hard question because it has different aspects. But yeah, as you say, Sima Samar is an example, and we had hundreds of millions of those women in Afghanistan, not just like the older generation, even the younger generation. Like I saw a lot of women fighting with the traditional conservative society, at the same time like struggling with the insecurity and not giving up. Like as you say, we had war and security, but there was so much hope. And I think women tried to do their best in the last 20 years at least that I know. And you saw the before that era in the documentaries too. Like I think it was difficult for them because they didn't just fight with the insecurity and war. They were fighting with people with their like traditional mindset, as was explained in the series, to make an individual successful life. It is hard to answer this.
No, you did a beautiful job. And Zohra John, you've lived through the fall of Afghanistan twice now.
Yes.
You could have stayed in California, you have family here in America. What made you want to go back?
First of all, let me thank Mayte and Marcel for really these beautiful footages. I never saw those footages as an Afghan. I did not see myself, in in those days, in the footage of myself in those demonstration, which was very popular in 1970s, the university's demonstration. And once I was part of that demonstration too, but I never saw the footages. I really congratulate you for these beautiful footages. Let me go back a little bit about the women's issue in Afghanistan. The women's movement in Afghanistan had and has a lot of ups and downs, And the biggest revolution which happened in the women's life in Afghanistan, it was in 1958 during the Prime Minister Daoud, that he made the veil, he made the chadar or the chadri as a choice, the burqa as a choice, And this choice started from the top, not from the bottom. It started from the President Daoud's wife, his daughters, the army generals, the cabinet ministers. They're all women and their wives and their daughters, they were the one who just threw the chadri or burqa and came to the society and show their faces, which we didn't have that even in 20 years of democracy. None of those politicians, except Mr. Ghani and his wife, probably me and my husband, we don't see any Afghan politicians, the important one, their wives. Even Mr. Karzai couldn't get the courage to bring his wife to the society. But to me, I was living a good life in America. When I left Afghanistan in 1980, after the Soviet invasion, I was very sad. I never wanted to leave Afghanistan. And the group of Afghans who left Afghanistan in 1980, they were not people to seek for economic opportunity. We were all political refugees. When you are a political refugee, it's different from the one who choose to come to America, you're in Europe for better life. I was always sort of sad and depressed because I was thinking about Afghanistan. I was keep thinking why I left Afghanistan. I wish I was there. But when the opportunity comes, when after September 11, let me tell you, from the ashes of September 11, the light of hope illuminated over the people of Afghanistan and especially over the women of Afghanistan. And at that time, my husband, he chose to go back to the country in 2005. He became member of parliament. He was very, active, and he had a very, high voices about the law and the parliament. And at that time, in 2015, I had a very good television show in America for Afghan community for 10 years. I had a talk show. It's called Zohra Talk Show, and people they love my show. But I thought, it's time for me to go back to the country and to know the new Afghanistan, to know the new generation of Afghan. And I was very happy to go back to the country. I met Mr. Ghani in the palace one night, and she had a lot of good memory about Afghanistan in 1970s. And we share our memory, And I told her, I really want to do something for Afghanistan, but I don't want to take anybody's place because I'm coming from America. I don't want to take someone's place. And she said, and she said, okay. And the next morning, she sent me an email, and she asked me to go to her office. And when I went there, it was a small office just with 2 or 3 people. They were working there. And she told me that you like to do something for Afghan women, for Afghan people in here in Afghanistan. This is the opportunity. And of course, at that time, my kids, they were all growing up. They were in college, and my husband was in Afghanistan. Then I chose to go to Afghanistan, and she asked me to be her media advisor. And I worked with her for 6 years. And this is a wonderful experience of my life.
That's great. That's great that it happened. It's sad that unfortunately you had to witness the disappointment twice in your life.
Yes.
As an Afghan American, as one who grew up here, I knew my parents were in pain, and I understood it a little, but I didn't fully understand it until last summer. Because I felt like the new Afghanistan was actually my Afghanistan too, because I spent time and years there. It's the Afghanistan that I knew. I had never seen it. My mom was 8 months pregnant when they escaped. So when I lived there as an adult, there was so much hope. There's so much hope. It was a terrifying time, but it was a hopeful time. So it's sad.
But Atia John, let me add something. I'm sorry to interrupt you. In 2003, when I went to Afghanistan for first time after September 11, when I landed in the airport, I told my husband, I like to leave. I like to leave soon. And he said, no, stay in Kabul, because I saw the war, you know, the residues of the war. Kabul was totally sort of destroyed, you know. It was dark, it was sad. And when I left Kabul, Kabul was a beautiful city. But in 2003, when I came, it was really very sad. And I thought, I cannot live in here because I want to keep the good memory of Kabul with me. I don't want to see this destroyed Kabul. But I stayed there. I went in 2005 and I went there in 2009. And tell you the truth, 2005, Kabul and Afghanistan was very safe and secure. No Talib, no explosion, no suicide bombing. That's why, you know, I was so surprised that everything started after 2008.
A lot of people will say that the focus, and I think it's true, is the focus, when the focus shifted to Iraq, the attention goes away. And when the attention goes away from Afghanistan, that's usually when everything falls apart. And you speak of the darkness of Kabul and the destruction. And that's primarily because of the civil war. And we talked about how the civil war brought us to the Taliban, and that is going to be episode 3 of Afghanistan, the Wounded Land. And I'd like to share a clip. Chris, do you mind playing episode 3's clip about the Taliban?
By 1996, the Taliban ruled over the country.
People were suffered from civil war badly. When Taliban came, amazingly, they was been welcomed by Afghans.
The new rulers brought peace, but enforced a harsh interpretation of Islamic law. Alcohol and sports were forbidden. Movie theaters were closed. Women were segregated.
محرمت کجاست؟ پایت چرا مالم شد؟ ناخونت چرا مالم شد؟ چادریت چرا کوتاست؟ چرا دستت از زیر چادری کشیدی؟ دیگه تمام زنای افغانستان دستیاچای زندان انداخته شدن به شمول خدا. وحشتناکترین زمان برای مردم افغانستان، اخصاً برای زنان افغانستان دوری طالب بوده.
She was just talking about the first time when the Taliban came to Afghanistan. They're back. They're back in power. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts on this is for the future of Afghanistan. I'm going to go to Marcel, actually, because you were there most recently. You were there this summer. Can you give us a perspective of what you see today in comparison to the Ghani and Karzai government time of Afghanistan?
There's so much. It's very complicated and very confusing, actually. After this film, I decided to do another film, which I started basically in January 2020, and I was able to see the last 1.5 years of the Ghani government. I came to Afghanistan because everybody was talking the Taliban might come back, but 75% of the country was already in Taliban hands. The Taliban were back already for a long time. And I think this was for us the most important thing, to try to understand, okay, what has happened that all this hope of 2001 suddenly disappeared, and that the Taliban were able to gain back the trust of the people. How many mistakes have been done on so many levels that the people once again felt betrayed and thought that the Taliban are the ones who are fighting for the rights. Here again, the gap between countryside and city, Zohra has been talking about this as well, was one of the reasons that the countryside on large parts welcomed again the Taliban as their saviors. Why? Because they felt betrayed by the international community. Why? Because unfortunately, there've been done a lot of mistakes of putting the trust into the wrong people who use this power in order to gain money, power, and whatever. I think this cycle of repeating mistakes, lost opportunity. This is what Afghanistan's history made it so tragic. And I think when I witnessed then in August how the regime collapsed, and I went back immediately in October, and then in January, then in March, and now in July, 4 trips after the fall of Kabul, and in this 8 months, almost a year actually, I could see how this country suddenly, it almost like Africa. It's the humanitarian crisis is so unbelievable, undescribable. The punishment of the sanctions which the international community put over a country in order to punish them, to have a government the Afghans actually never chose. It was the Americans who did the deal with the Taliban without including the Afghan government nor the Afghan people. So there again, this betrayal. And once they're out, they punish the people, and everybody who wants to help the Afghans is running into this moment of what can I do without whitewashing the Taliban? So this is a catch-22, and the situation on the ground is this terrible that everybody who's been going and coming back is fighting with PTSD, because you see all this children, you see it's a country full of widows in a country where women are not allowed to work. So they have to send out the kids to back or to do whatever. The drug problem went through the roof. You see, this looks like Mad Max. We're talking about a country where 10% of the people are drug addicts because they see in drugs the only escape. So it's so terrible. And I think the drought is on top. The international community was the only one who gave really jobs. All this money is gone, and the money of the government is frozen. So obviously the government is being punished, but the people are suffering. And the huge danger is that another civil war will break out. And here becomes the very complicated thing. The international community left for good. They won't come back in order to topple this government. So what is the options? Do we have to make this government work, make them accountable in order to respect women's rights, human rights forever, not only for women, for men and for children as well, in order to avoid another civil war? Because we learned, as in the civil war brought the Taliban. Now what happens? Will they bring ISIS? What is the next monster we are creating right now? And I think that's the most frightening thing on the horizon, and the very complicated situation where we need vision, and we need to encourage the international community, put their spotlight back onto this country, and to have the Afghans who are in the diaspora being able to come back and build this country for the Afghans.
Beautifully and passionately said. And it is a fear I think that everyone on this panel has, is that we know the problems, but we also know no one's listening, unfortunately. That's why we're grateful for everyone who's joined today to listen, to try to understand and not forget Afghanistan, because let's be honest, when Afghanistan is forgotten, the Afghan people are the first to suffer, but that suffering then crosses the borders. Unfortunately, we saw that with 9/11. We saw that, we saw that with the 7/7 bombings. These attacks, the terrorism, when they have a breeding ground and an open one like Afghanistan, we see suffering all over the world, but it begins with the Afghans. And Zohra Jan, I want to go to you now, and then Nasrin Jan, because one continuous group that continues to suffer is the women and the girls in the country. Why is that? Why is it the Mujahideen, the civil war leaders who were war heroes who became warlords, they hurt the women, they raped the women, they subjugated the women as well? And the Taliban came and they're a reprieve, and they banished women from society. And even after 2001, let's not pretend the last 20 years was easy for girls and women. It was difficult because of the mindset that was still there, but these women persisted and persisted and persisted and flourished with their own doing. Why is it that everyone targets the girls and the women?
Well, the thing is, women of Afghanistan, they are always victim of violence, unfortunately. As I said before, in 1958, when the chadri or burqa became as a choice, women became very active in social life. You know. They became teachers, doctors, nurses, and even engineers, journalists. But the movement of women during the time of King and during the time of President Daoud, it was a very natural movement. Slowly, everything was progressing, you know, very slowly, but very assertive. But when the coup d'etat of 1978 happened, which they call it revolution, I call it revolution too, because the whole society has been changed. During the communist era, the women of Afghanistan really progressed a lot. You know, so many young Afghan girls, they sent abroad for higher education. The girls, they went to university. You know, they were at workforce. You know, there was a very high movement and a strong movement for women. As you know, the communists, the socialists, this is their ideology. You know, equality between man and woman. But do not forget, Afghanistan is a very conservative society. More than 99% of Afghan are Muslim. They are conservative Muslim. When the Soviet invaded Afghanistan and the Mujahideen started the war, in the back of their mind, when they took Kabul, especially Kabul, in the back of their mind, any Afghan woman who doesn't wear hijab or chadar, they thought she's a communist. Or any Afghan man who didn't have a traditional clothes, he was a communist in the eyes of those freedom fighters. And when they took Kabul, the first thing they said, you know, they closed the school. They closed the girls' school too, you know. And when the civil war started, of course, the women were the big victim of the civil war. And the Taliban took power in the vacuum of power, they took power in Afghanistan. And when the Taliban took power, they said very straightforward that we cannot fight two wars. On one hand, for the sovereignty of the country, keep the borders safe. On the other hand, you know, we need to secure the women of Afghanistan. That's why they asked the women to stay home, you know, stay at home. But that was, we thought probably for 6 months, probably for 1 year, you know, but at the end of the day, that was their ideology, unfortunately. They don't want women to participate in politics. They don't want women to participate in culture events and in business, to become a journalist and all those things. This is their mind. This is their set of mind. And this wars, you know, the Soviet Union invasion, the presence of American soldiers in Afghanistan, and NATO soldiers in Afghanistan, changed the status, the status mind of Afghan man, you know. They think they are after our women. Like in the eyes of, for this past 20 years of democracy, I was living there for 6 years. I saw, you know, I met Afghan men. They thought that this women's right is a Western, imposed on us by Western countries, by Western culture. Human rights is imposed on us by Western countries, and we don't want that. This is the reason, you know, they don't want women to really be free, you know. But this is wrong. So many good stuff for the past 20 years happened to women of Afghanistan. They are very talented, you know, in the education area, in politics, in business, in law, you know, in culture. But unfortunately, today, you know, Taliban, they implement the same harsh ideology that that the same harsh politics that they implemented in 1996, they did today too. But we are getting very conflicting news from Afghanistan. On one hand, I see young Afghan girls, they are on television, in radio, although they are with the very conservative clothes, but they are talking. We saw women on the street of Kabul. We saw women working in the airport, or they are doctors, they are nurses, but they banned secondary education. And, I'm really confused what is going on in Afghanistan right now.
Well, so you mentioned that they banned secondary education. Today is day 355 that teenage girls are no longer allowed to go to school, but yet they allowed female university students to go. But
Yes.
by banning teenage girls, you've effectively made sure that the next generation cannot make it to university.
Yes.
Nasrin John, what hope is there for Afghan women and girls right now? Like, what can they hold on to? What can they try to hold on to? Because right now it seems like their hope is dying with every day. They had that moment where the Taliban said, you can go back to school. That day arrived, they walked to school, and then they were told, no, it's closed. It's like they are effectively erasing them from society and breaking their heart piece by piece. What kind of hope can they have right now?
Unfortunately, I don't see any hope. If I talk from what I heard from Afghanistan, like I talked with my cousin a week ago. She's like 14 years old, and she was very intelligent, very smart. Like, she was dreaming, like she was following me, she was competing with me, and she used to tell her mother that, yeah, one day I will be like Nasrin, I will be a Fulbrighter, I will go abroad and study, and I will do something. She's so passionate. And I'm just giving an example to say what hope means for a girl right now in Afghanistan. Like my cousin was crying like a baby on phone and saying that now I can't go to school, and that was the only thing I was dreaming all my life about. And it's not just I am banned from school. There are a lot of other restrictions happening inside a family, inside a society, just for girls. Her mother, who was not able to go to school during the Taliban era and did it after the US invasion, she is suppressing her daughter. She is saying, you cannot go out, you cannot do this or that, just because of the security, just because to make her safe. I know I don't agree with her, but like there is it's not just a school, it's a general, it's an overall mentality happening again. Like, people are trying to adopt with what is happening, and they are forcing her to think about marriage. She's underage. Like, just imagine, what does hope mean for a girl in Afghanistan right now who has no clear perspective of the future to make like an individual plan for herself? They can't think of that anymore. I know girls, I have friends who are desperately studying and thinking to apply for some scholarships abroad, but they think, how can we go? We are not allowed to travel without a man family member accompanying them. So like, they are in a point that they don't see any way back or forward. They're stuck, like I don't know, like I can't imagine myself there. Like, I used to just, whenever we talk about Afghanistan, I used to just imagine myself 14 years old, a schoolgirl, now a year at home, and I can do nothing. Like, it could be me instead of my cousin. It could be you or anyone else in Afghanistan in an age that you can do nothing. You are just condemned to be at home, and there is no future for you except marrying, and we know what kind of marriage.
It's basically like a bird going from one cage to another cage and being tortured in that cage. It's unfortunate. And you mentioned if they could even get a scholarship, they wouldn't be allowed to go. But many countries are now no longer even giving scholarships to Afghan students anymore. They've stopped interviewing them. They've stopped even offering it to them. So the hope has been coming like daggers from all sides. But we're running out of time, so I want to move on to the next clip. The Afghans never wanted a forever war. Everyone talks about, oh, well, we weren't going to be there forever. No Afghan wanted a war. That's not what they wanted. Everyone has told me they wanted a forever friendship. They wanted the promises that were made to be kept. They wanted that friendship so that the country could move forward. They were willing to do it on their own, but with a friend supporting them from behind. But what now? What about the women? Chris, can we play the clip from the episode Trap?
The future of Afghanistan is uncertain. What we do know is that in order to break the vicious cycles of the past, the country will need the strong voice of its women.
ما بیش از 3 مذاکره را در سر میز با طالبا شیشتیم. زنای افغانستان هم او زنایی نیستن که 20 سال پیش بودن. با شلاق به ما بزنن و ما باز از کنج خانه بیرون نشوم. اونا میفهمن که دیگه صدای ما را در گلون خفک کده نمیتونه. ای خاک به ما، به دهاتای مثل ما نیاز داره. ما مبارزه کنیم، ما مقاومت کنیم، ما صدا بلند کنیم.
We can solve the problem by talking and negotiating, by tolerating each other, and by respecting each other. We can disagree, but we don't need to kill each other.
So we've talked about the women in the bleak future. I think the most frustrating part about this was that there were women involved in the negotiations with the Taliban. The Afghans wanted to do it their way. Unfortunately, it was ripped from underneath them. And now these voices are being muzzled. But what is also incredible is that through that fear, through the violence, because when the women go out, and we have seen a lot of powerful women, brave women, go out on the streets and protests, the Taliban have come after them with guns, shooting at them to try to stop the protests. But they do pop up every once in a while. Are we going to see this continue? Are we going to see women continuously go out in the streets to fight for their rights? Or is this kind of a waiting game? The Taliban are playing it themselves, knowing full well that the attention will go away and the women will have to be stuck at home. The men will suffer too. The children will suffer. Nasrin John, what do you think?
We have an expression in Persian. I don't know how to say it in English. They say, "Ba marg begir ke ba tab razi, ba tab begir, na ba marg begir ke ba tab razi shava." And they are doing that. I don't know how to say it. Like they are. It's hard to explain that expression, but I know. Like, let me just say, like, women are trying their best. Like yeah. You say after even the suppression, like even detention and torturing, anything, they still pop up, the protests, but it is really hard. Like they suppress every time in different levels. So gradually, like it happened in 90s, like it gradually, I think, will decrease, will get down, because like how long, how more victims? They will get just frustrated. They want to survive. So I think without any like real support, it is not possible for women to fight for their rights, like in a civil way, because they are still reacting like with a violence, not like in a civil way. So it is really hard. And I have friends that were in those protests. Now I talk to them and they say, I think this is enough. No one is hearing us. And we are just losing friends. And I don't know, it might change, but yeah, they need support from maybe international community. I don't know. I'm not sure even anyone get hopeful with international community aid anymore, because they don't ever give the company till the end. But yeah, it is really, really hard to know what's gonna happen for women.
Zohra John, you've seen this played out before. Are we going to see another breeding ground for terror? Are we going to see other attacks being planned there and performed elsewhere? I think in the trailer, we heard Dr. Sima Samar mention that none of the hijackers and terrorists from 9/11 were Afghan, but they had all been to Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. We're already seeing foreign fighters flocking into the country, training in the country. Is this going to cross the borders again? Is there going to be an international intervention in the future?
Well, as Marcel said that he was in Afghanistan in 1996, because of economic restriction that came on top Taliban, imposed on Taliban, the Taliban became isolated. And when the Taliban became isolated, Afghanistan became very dangerous. And Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, the guests, in Afghanistan, and we all saw the consequences there, September 11. Today, if we are in a very delicate situation. On one hand, we ask Taliban, to let girls to go back to school, because to see the human rights, the human rights should be implemented. All these things that the Western countries, the international community ask from the Taliban. On the other hand, if we are bringing too many restrictions on Taliban and isolated them, it's not only the Taliban, there's 40 million people living in that country, the poverty, of course, the land of Afghanistan will be used again, against the international community. And this is a very tragic, really. For the past 20, okay.
Sorry, go ahead. Please finish your thought.
My point is, once we had international community, we had American with us. Unfortunately, this is American foreign policy. They always go to a third world country, even to South America. They are supporting the corrupt politicians. This is their way, this is their style of politics, And still, for the past 20 years, a lot of achievement happened in Afghanistan. Americans do a better settlement. They could include the government of Afghanistan in the agreement and the negotiation in Doha with the Taliban. They didn't do that. And after that, when the agreement happened between American and Taliban, they did not respect the government of Afghanistan. Although the government of Afghanistan in 2020, it was a functioning government, and the security forces of Afghanistan, they were fighting, they were keeping the security, the Taliban did not even they did not take one district, but they did not include the government those days. Nowadays, I'm really afraid, if we let them to be isolated, although they are saying there's a 20-something terrorist group are active in Afghanistan, I don't know, but we see every day there's explosion in Kabul, almost. Like the Russian embassy was safe for the past 20 years, and happened in 2 days, it was a suicide bombing in Russian embassy, in front of Russian embassy. I think, it's time for the world to really engage with the Taliban. There's no choice. About the civil war, as Marcel said, there's a pocket of resistance right now in the north of Afghanistan, no doubt about it. But the neighbors of Afghanistan, the countries like China, Russia, even America, India, those countries, they decided do not help the resistance in Afghanistan. They don't want another civil war in Afghanistan, because the security of Afghanistan, it's very important due to due to geographic location of Afghanistan. Because of that, then what is the choice? The choice is, that we have to bring the good diaspora back to the country. We should talk to the Taliban that they have to negotiate with the rest of the people of Afghanistan. They have to get the legitimacy from the people of Afghanistan. So far, they are just a cult, it's a group of Taliban. They took the power. You cannot run a country by mullah in Mawlavi. They are mullah, they are religious people. They are not the professional people. And this is my opinion, because so far, I don't see another alternative, unfortunately.
That would also require them to allow that. So Mayte and Marcel, you guys have a lot of time. Go.
Very quickly, I think what you just said, and it's so complex. You said it, how to even imagine after what you said, Nasrin, what the future of your 14-year-old cousin is, how even to think about that the only solution lies in we have to start to negotiate with these people who are doing this to the younger generation. It's very complicated to think, but if we understand, this country suffered so much brain drain over the last 40 years. People who've been the hope for the country, all of them are now in the US, in the UK, in Canada. And the only one who really stayed back are the ones who are still with this mindset. So isn't this a possible solution to really see, is there a movement to bring these people back and build a counter majority of mindset of young people who this country, the Taliban need these young people in order to get this government going. And in order to say, we are not silent and we are a lot of people and we come back in order, you have to listen to us. I don't know if this is completely impossible, but I think there might be a solution in order to make this work. Sorry I'm not an Afghan, and it's so easy to say without me going back as an Afghan. I was always very privileged because I'm a foreigner, but just wondering, what do you think?
Nasrin, John, do you have some insight? I see that you.
Yeah, I know we are running out of time, so just very briefly, I want to say, because Zohra, John, and Marcel opened a new door to a new topic, a new discussion, negotiation, and I think there were negotiations happening a lot, and this is the result of negotiation. So I don't think the solution is negotiation, or at least not that type of negotiation that we had before this. It's very complicated. We need to have another discussion about that.
It is very complicated because to even negotiate, you have to have a willing party. And when that party is the Taliban, they won the war, and they feel like they're in charge. They're putting away an entire 50% of the population, the women, who could be utilized in such amazing ways. Like Mayte was saying, the women of Afghanistan have been some of the most incredible that I've also met in my time in travels. But to shun them away, you can't really have a society that functions.
Exactly. This is the problem. The problem is that Taliban won, but Taliban maybe are not able to rule the country without the people. And maybe they need the people in order to not just go down. So maybe the solution maybe comes from them when they are going to be totally, in ruins. So maybe we can see this hopefully in the next months. Let's see if they ask for help. And maybe the solution also is Afghan have to find the solution themselves without anybody, and without these foreigners like telling them what to do. I was listening to Zohra, and I listened to Marcel that has been there a few months ago, and this is the solution. Just listen to the people that wants the country to be healthy and wants the country to be okay.
I can talk to all of you all day long. And I feel selfish because I've been asking all the questions, but I'm going to open up the questions to the audience that has been listening in. And the first one that we have is from Baktash Ahadi. And they say that I appreciate all your perspective, and they thank all of you as well as I do. They were also wondering that because of the circumstances in Afghanistan, is war inevitable? I'm assuming war again, more war. And also, they want to know what Afghanistan has taught you. And I'm assuming that question would be to the filmmakers. You know, what has Afghanistan taught you?
This is a very, very difficult question. I think when I came back from Afghanistan, the first thing I realized is people doesn't know how lucky they are to be born here in the US, in the States, in Europe, you know, in healthy countries. They don't know. They don't know what it is to be in a constant diaspora. So they don't understand refugees at all. And they don't understand especially Afghans. When I came back, I realized how PTSD it's important, and we have to understand how people is after 4 wars. It's not 1 or 2, it's 4. They are totally destroyed. I met traumatized, traumatized and destroyed in their minds. I think they need a lot of help, and we need to do this effort to understand Afghanistan and not saying, you know, put them all in the terrorist side. They're all terrorists. They are all dangerous. You know, we have in their, we say Afghans immediately, security, fear. So for me, it teaches me this, that they are human beings. They are so strong. We have a lot to learn from them. We don't have to teach them anything. It's the opposite.
Zohra John, is war inevitable?
Yeah, it could happen in another war if people, they don't have food on their table, you know, if there's the poverty is immense right now, if there's a lack of security, and you see every day there's a suicide bombing, because the big promise of Taliban was security, and they were proud of bringing the security to people of Afghanistan. If there's no security, of course, finally, although people of Afghanistan, they are very resilient and they are very patient people, they might rise up against the Taliban, no doubt about it. Or it might be another fraction among the Taliban themselves. I see that, you know. In the Afghanistan politics, I'm at the life history of Afghanistan, tell you the truth. In my life, you know, we saw a lot of fraction among the Afghan movement, political movement. It might be a fraction among Taliban. We might have a Taliban, the young Taliban or younger, or maybe some older Taliban that they don't want, you know, the previous one to ban school for the girls, like even today, that the girls going to secondary education in Mazar in Paktia. This is a good sign, I think, you know, that show, you know, some Taliban in some provinces of Afghanistan, they are not listening to the Kabul's Taliban. This is one thing, but on the other hand, if the world is becoming fed up with them, you know, it might be another war, no doubt about it. But that war, tell you the truth, if the war is happening in Afghanistan, it will be very dangerous war. I'm afraid of disintegration of Afghanistan. Because, you know, the Taliban, they fought American and NATO for 20 years. And the war machine was very strong from international community. Every day almost it was a bombardment. But they fought back. And we have Pakistan also, you know, on the other hand. Because of that, this next civil war, it will be much more worse than the previous civil war. And we don't want this war anymore. It's enough is enough. No more war in Afghanistan. But there's another solution. We have to look for other solution, you know, to talk to Taliban or convince them. I think the Islamic country should get involved more in this situation than the Western country, than America. Like if we talk about the women of Afghanistan, I'm surprised how come the women in all Islamic countries, they're sort of silence. They don't say anything. Whatever is coming from Europe and America. Whatever is coming from Europe and America, Taliban, they don't accept that, because in their back of their mind, they think they change our women, they change our way of life. Then I hope the Islamic country, they get involved more in this situation.
I think that a lot of people are waiting to see if that's going to happen. Nasrin, John, another question that we have is, what can the international community do to help the deteriorating state of affairs? And mixed in with that, another question that I want you to think of that in this as well. Is there anything practical that the audience, this is another question, the audience of this event that are watching you guys talk right now can do beyond supporting just aid agencies? So what can the international community do, as in our governments, and what can the individuals who are listening in right now do to help Afghanistan?
Yeah, I want to be very brief, and I think international community should just use the pressure, because I think nothing else can help the situation. You know, like they are being very soft and very impartial now, while it was very different during 20 years of US occupation. So I personally expect like some pressure from the international community. I think like the asset freezing is not working, you know, because as it was said, it's punishing the people, not that much the government, the de facto government, because they already have their financial support from other countries. So there should be a systematic plan, like countries should discuss it and come up with a plan how to negotiate with the Taliban, with this de facto government, to bring changes. Like they have been really silent in a year about the women education. Like they just released some statements and they don't work. That's nothing. They should practically come up with a plan. And about the audience, I can't like prescribe something. It is difficult, but like personally, I think like everyone can do something in their levels. Like if you can just raise awareness, if you are in a state that had some refugees from Afghanistan recently, you can just connect to them, talk to them, like welcome them, and just raise this awareness, just share this documentary, share with everyone, because I talk to Americans here and some of them even don't know where Afghanistan is. What they had no idea about it. Not all of them, but there are people who don't know anything about Afghanistan and what was going on in Afghanistan, especially through this two decades. So yeah, actually supporting aid agencies is very good, but like at the same time, if anyone can come up with some like educational plan for girls, like online courses, equipments, like if I don't know, I'm just desperately thinking to do something for like girls, for the youth who have the education, who have the talent, who can bring a change in any country they are, to have some like educational opportunities. If you can just have an organization or like connect them with like organizations who offer scholarships, just do it, even just for one person. It will change one person's life, a future family life, and a society life. And can I just answer something with the next question? She's my friend. Sasha is saying like, where should I start to learn about Afghanistan? Talk to me more. When I'm in the library, you can just talk to me.
Another thing is to watch the series for sure. And I'm hoping the filmmakers make the second part for sure. And, you know, Michael Sheridan actually brings up something very important too when it comes to what you can do in the audience. And that's to contact your Congress members and support of the Afghan Adjustment Act. And that's basically an act that's being sent to Congress to help and make permanent status for a lot of the Afghans who were brought here in the past year, because it's being stalled. It's stalled right now. So that is definitely one thing that you can do, is call your representatives, send out emails, texts, however you can reach them, and tell them to support. That's the Afghan Adjustment Act. And you know, so
let me say something about American, Atia John.
Okay.
You know, unfortunately, with the way American left Afghanistan, the people inside Afghanistan, they don't trust American anymore. You know, they stay in Afghanistan for 20 years. They built a system. They brought democracy to Afghanistan. The way they left Afghanistan is a tragedy for freedom lover, for democracy, for the people of Afghanistan, and even for the people of America, especially for those parents that I show my strong sympathy to those parents who lost their kids, their children in Afghanistan. And I really thank the generosity of the people of America and international community. But I'm very mad at the way they drop Afghanistan. You know, American foreign policy is like their fast food. They go fast and they want to get out fast without any result. And this is very sad. Let me bring some quote. US leader repeatedly cited the plight of Afghan women and girls under the Taliban as a justification for the war. In 2001, President Bush said that. And Mrs. Bush said, the women and children of Afghanistan have suffered enough. And this great nation of us will work hard to bring hope and help to the people of Afghanistan. And Ms. Hillary Clinton, while she was the Secretary of the State Department, she said to the Afghan women that we will be always on your side and we never leave you alone and we will help you. And nowadays, you don't hear none of those women on those personalities come out to the television, talk about women of Afghanistan, because they know they made a mistake. And I'm sad as a citizen of America. Too many money went there, you know. They built a system for Afghanistan. This is for the first time after wars, you know, Afghan, they had institutions. They had laws, you know, they had a good constitution. The women went to universities. There was a hope for the young people. They all vanished in 24 hours. This is very sad. They could do a better settlement for Afghanistan. Why not? Why they didn't do that? I think American policymakers, they had the Ukraine war in their head, and they cannot participate in two wars, and they just left. I'm not saying Afghans are not at fault. Afghan politicians, they are at fault. Everybody, all of us at fault. But the international community, they were listening to Taliban more than us in those days. And the Doha agreement was not a good agreement.
Powerful, powerful words. And I think those are words that so many people agree with you on. I will say that not only did I hear a lot of Afghans say and use the term betrayal after the fall in last August, but a lot of Americans and members of the international community who served there, who went there. I spoke to a woman who worked at the embassy who was crying. I spoke to former Marines who were service there who felt like they lied and betrayed the Afghans that they trusted, because I believe we were all in these meetings. We heard international community members, ambassadors, generals, everyone continuously promising the Afghan people, we will never abandon you. And again, they never wanted a forever war, but they did want a forever friendship. And unfortunately, that trust was shattered. And it's terrifying as a journalist knowing what happens and reading history books, what this means for the future of Afghanistan, but also the future of the world. Because now the Taliban has an enemy to point the finger at. For many years, it was the Russians. You know, whenever you wanted to blame something in Afghanistan, you blamed the Russians. And now it's going to be the Americans and really NATO, all the countries that were involved. Unfortunately, that's the sad reality, is that the lives in Afghanistan and the hearts were broken, but so were so many Americans, Spaniards, Brits, a lot of people who really invested their life, time, and blood in hopes of making Afghanistan flourish. I am so sorry for taking up so much of your time, but this was such a great, impactful and insightful conversation. And I can't thank you all enough for being here and talking to us and sharing your thoughts. And a reminder that all episodes of Afghanistan, the Wounded Land, are now streaming online at the World Channel and on the PBS app. And a big thank you to the filmmakers, Mayte Carrasco and Marcel Mettelsiefen, and executive producer Chris Hastings, who's back there making sure this is going on, and your entire team. And of course, Zohra John and Nasrin John, thank you so much. And the entire World Channel team for bringing this to our screens. And to learn more about World Channel, visit worldchannel.org and be sure to sign up for the newsletter and YouTube channel for more documentary films and filmmaker interviews.